A finance graduate in London, top of his class, full of confidence, even bragging to his friends that CFA Level 1 would be just another line on his CV. He thought it would be like university exams, where you cram hard for 2 weeks and somehow scrape through. But when exam day arrived, the paper wasn't just tough, it was brutal. The result? He failed, not just by a little, but by a wide margin. His ego was crushed, his confidence shattered, and suddenly, the letters CFA that once looked like a shiny golden badge started feeling like a mountain he couldn't climb. And here's the blunt truth most people don't tell you. His story is not unique. In fact, it's almost the norm. Only about 40% of candidates pass CFA Level 1. That means more than half walk out humiliated, sometimes too embarrassed to even tell their colleagues or family they failed. And that's where we set the record straight. If you think CFA Level 1 is just another exam you can cram for, think again. This isn't a university test. This is a professional battlefield where only discipline, endurance, and smart strategy survive. The CFA Institute doesn't care if you were a genius in class or if you already have a finance degree. It sets the bar at a level where only the prepared can stand tall. So, what does it really take to crack CFA Level 1? That's what we're going to break down today. Case study style, real stories, real struggles, and the hard-earned lessons that separate the ones who pass from the ones who repeat. One of the biggest misconceptions floating around is this. It's just Level 1, it can't be that hard. People say this because they assume Level 1 is just the entry ticket, the baby step before the real deal at Level 2 and 3. But here's the reality check. It covers 10 subject areas, more than 3,000 pages of material, and asks you to retain and apply knowledge under extreme time pressure. To put that into perspective, that's more reading and learning than 3 full master's courses crammed into one single exam. Imagine the breadth of topics from ethics to derivatives, from microeconomics to financial statement analysis, all compressed into one 4.5-hour paper. The blunt truth? If you walk into that exam hall unprepared, CFA Level 1 will eat you alive. And it won't even apologize. Now, to really understand why it's this way, let's walk through what CFA Level 1 actually looks like. But instead of giving you a boring list, let's picture it like a day in the life of a candidate. Imagine someone like Daniel, who works in New York in investment banking, pulling 12-hour shifts. He gets home at 9 p.m., tired, but he knows he has to put in 2 to 3 hours of CFA study. Weekends? Forget partying. He spends 8 to 10 hours grinding through practice questions. And what exactly is he studying? The exam is broken down into 10 major topics, each one demanding its share of blood, sweat, and tears. Ethics sits right at the top, making up 15 to 20% of the exam. This isn't just theory, it's the gatekeeper. Fail ethics, and you're already walking on thin ice. Next comes quantitative methods, about 8 to 12%, where math feels like sniper shots. You miss a formula or a step, and you bleed points instantly. Then comes financial reporting and analysis, 13 to 17%, the monster chapter. This is accounting on steroids, balance sheets, income statements, cash flows, but with the CFA twist of expecting you to analyze like a pro. Economics adds another 8 to 12%, macro and micro. Because the CFA doesn't just want you to balance accounts, it wants you to think like a policymaker shaping financial systems. Corporate finance, also 8 to 12%, is where you get your CEO moment. Capital budgeting, risk assessment, WACC. Equity investments, 10 to 12%, is the crown jewel, the stuff people usually associate with finance, stocks, valuation, real-world trading techniques. Fixed income, 10 to 12%, is Wall Street's chessboard, bonds, yields, interest rates, and the subtle strategies that move billion. Derivatives, 5 to 8%, may look small in weight, but it's a tricky beast with options, futures, and swaps waiting to trap you. Alternative investments, also 5 to 8%, is hedge funds, private equity, real estate, low weight, yes, but easy marks if you know it. Finally, portfolio management at 5 to 8%, the endgame, where all the risk and return theories converge into strategy. When you put all of this together, you start to see why CFA Level 1 feels like trying to drink from a fire hose. But the weight isn't just academic, it's psychological. Candidates face brutal challenges. Let's take the story of Raj, working in Mumbai. He thought his strong accounting background would give him an edge. He started studying late, thinking he could breeze through with just 2 months of prep. What happened? Time ran out. CFA requires over 300 hours of study on average, but most candidates underestimate that. Raj burned out, couldn't finish the syllabus, and panicked in the exam. Another story, Sarah, from Boston. She was disciplined, but she made one fatal mistake. She ignored ethics. She thought, I'll focus on FRA and Quant, those are tougher. But on exam day, borderline scores pushed her into the fail zone because the CFA Institute uses ethics adjustment to decide close cases. That's right, if you're on the edge, ethics can save you or bury you. And then there's overconfidence. Ahmed, who studied finance at a top Ivy League school, thought level 1 would be beneath him. He underestimated the sheer breadth of topics and walked out devastated. The reality? This exam doesn't care if you were top of your class at Harvard. CFA Level 1 levels the playing field, and sometimes destroys it. Now let's move into a more detailed case study. Meet Emma, a fictional but very realistic candidate in London. She works a standard 9-to-6 job in finance. At first, she came home too exhausted to study and skipped ethics entirely, thinking she'd make up for it later. For the first few weeks, she felt okay, but when she started taking mocks, her scores hovered at 55%. Panic set in. She realized she couldn't afford to skip around anymore. She adjusted her strategy, focused heavily on FRA, ethics, and equity, the high-weight topics that gave the biggest return on effort. She began practicing with active recall methods, flashcards, timed questions, rather than just passively reading. Weekends turned into full-day grinds. Weekdays meant sacrificing Netflix and nights out. By the time exam day came, she wasn't perfect, but she was prepared. She scored above 70% in FRA, ethics, and equity, and it carried her across the line. She didn't pass on her first attempt, but she came back, fought smarter, and cleared on the second. And here's the lesson from Emma's story. CFA Level 1 isn't about being a genius. It's about resilience, strategy, and humility. So, what strategies really work if you want to survive this battlefield? Let's cut the fluff and give it straight. First, don't skip ethics. Period. It's not just weighted, it's a tiebreaker in borderline cases. Second, prioritize the heavyweights. FRA, ethics, and equity together make up nearly half the exam. Master them, and you've built a strong foundation. Third, ditch passive reading. CFA isn't about memorizing lines, it's about application. Active recall, practice questions, and mocks beat reading notes any day. Fourth, start early. 6 to 8 months before is the minimum if you're working a full-time job. Procrastination is the silent killer of CFA dreams. Fifth, simulate exam conditions. Sitting for 180 multiple-choice questions in 4.5 hours is a stamina test as much as a knowledge test. You need to train your mind like an athlete. But let's not just focus on the pain. What happens after you pass? Because that's where the reward lies. Passing CFA Level 1 doesn't make you a charter holder, but it opens doors. And if you're serious about passing CFA Level 1, this is just the beginning. Because here at CFA by Education Bench, I break down every subject, every formula, and every strategy in plain, no BS language. So hit subscribe, because your CFA journey starts right here, and trust me, you don't want to go into this exam blind.